So our session today is called Saving Lives Today. And what we know certainly is that the breast cancer landscape is changing. We know that where we were in breast cancer 30 years ago when Komen was first founded is a very different place. Back then, we thought about breast cancer as one disease, and we treated it like one disease. But what we know now is that breast cancer is really a family of diseases. It's not just one. And then we didn't have as many treatment options. We didn't have the kinds of things that we have been able to see in terms of breast cancer progress in the most recent 30 years. And now we're really moving to a place where we're understanding and we're treating every woman's breast cancer. And that we know that that is different for different women, and it affects people differently. We're also moving our discoveries from the bench, which is where the lab is, where some of these discoveries are being found, to the bedside, where patients are able to receive treatments, and then finally to the curbside, to be able to really deliver the research to all of the people who need it. We also know that at Komen, it's very important for us that where a woman lives should not determine whether she lives. Certainly, that is not the case currently for breast cancer, and that should change. So as the challenges of solving breast cancer continue and that problem continues to evolve, Komen as an organization must also adapt in order to answer the calls from our communities and the needs from our research. And we've seen that. We've seen that over the years as the biology has changed, so has our portfolio. And when we knew more, we did more. And certainly that's the flavor of what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about how we can actually achieve our mission in total together. And that when we begin to look at all of those different areas of our work and what we do, there's great power in the kind of progress that we can have together. And there's a number of important questions that we as an organization should be asking ourselves. So, are we still relevant? And what does that mean for us moving forward? What does that look like? If not Komen, then who? And what is Komen uniquely situated to do better than anyone else? Joining us today to discuss the changing landscape, to discuss many of these issues in breast cancer, where we've been, where we need to go, how we can prepare for tomorrow, I'm going to first call out two individuals who have been longtime supporters of Komen. And they've worked to fight with us against breast cancer for years. First, I'd like to call out Dr. Sandy Feinstone. She's a Komen advocate and scholar. She's a president of the Inland Empire affiliate, past president and race chair of the Orange County affiliate. Thank you. And I'd also like to call out Dr. George Sledge, chief of oncology at Stanford University and Komen's chief scientific advisor. Hi, George. Thank you. So, George, I'll ask you the first question. And from a physician's standpoint, can you tell us what have the last 30 years been for breast cancer?
Sure. The first I should mention, the fire marshal asked me to come out to lower the charisma quotient in the room. There was a concern over spontaneous combustion, apparently. The last 30 years have been a roller coaster in breast cancer. When I started out, and I started out about 30 years ago, right around the same time as Komen, interestingly enough, we knew so little about breast cancer. We knew so little about the biology of the disease. We truly thought it was basically a single disease. What I now tell my fellows when I'm in clinic with them is this is truly a family of disease. Think of it as a boarding house where a bunch of criminals hang out. Some of them are petty thieves, some of them are killers. You have to identify them differently, apprehend them differently, and punish them differently. And that's breast cancer today. This is a disease where we now are able to plumb the real depths of the biology of the disease almost at an individual patient level. And this is transforming both how we look at the disease, but also how we treat the disease.
Mm-hmm. And back then, what could a woman expect when she was diagnosed?
Well, I remember as a resident, actually, in one of my very first weeks in residency, seeing a woman come in who had a lump in her breast and in her armpit. And in those days, it was treated almost as an emergency. She was told she would need to go in the next day. She would have a mastectomy, and in those days, that was not infrequently a Halsted radical mastectomy, horrible surgery, followed by an extensive lymph node dissection, and then she would go home. That was then. That was what you could expect. Today, one of the biggest changes, of course, has been the introduction of choice into things. A woman has, in many cases, a choice as to what degree of surgery she wants, a mastectomy or a lumpectomy and radiation therapy. We have choices that are based upon treatment options. We have choices that are based upon our understanding of the biology of the disease. We can now tell a woman, or most women with early stage breast cancer, what's your likelihood of having a recurrence? What actual benefit will you get from chemotherapy versus hormonal therapy versus HER2 targeted therapy? And how can we apply it to you as an individual? And that individualization of therapy has been just transformative for the field.
And Sandy, from your perspective,
Yes.
You've been with the affiliate network for a long time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what you've seen over those years?
From a patient perspective, just as George said, when I was diagnosed, March 30th, 30 years ago, I signed a document that gave the physician permission to do what was ever necessary. And when I woke up from the surgery, the doctor said to me, "We did the right thing." However, he didn't tell me what the right thing was. And it took 3 days for me to take the bandages off to find out what the right thing was. So different today. There was no education. There was no, this is going to be shocking to most of the crowd, there was no internet. No support. And a woman was kind of out there on her own. And then Komen came onto the scene. And Komen really changed things. Cancer was not said out loud at that time. In my community, breast was not said out loud, and certainly not breast cancer together. And when Komen started educating the public and communities around the country about breast cancer, it was said out loud, and it was said in very appropriate terms. And the pink ribbon was brilliant because it allowed women a very soft and gentle vehicle to talk about breast cancer and to tell the world that they were survivors. We started out very small. We didn't know, a lot of us, what we were doing. We just knew we had to do it. And we had Nancy. And we had Nancy who made a promise to a sister, and each of us could make our own promises to our own sisters that we could really make a difference. And we did.
Yeah, absolutely. We've come so far in 30 years. And one of the things, George, you and I have talked about is that we're at a really unique place in Komen's history. And I'd love to sort of hear from you where you think Komen has an opportunity to be relevant and lead in the next generation.
Well, let's start off. As a cancer researcher, I'm incredibly worried about the future of our field. There's declining federal support for breast cancer research. At the same time, there's just incredible opportunity. We've learned so much in recent years. We now have, as a result of our tools in genomics, the ability at an individual patient level to know exactly which genes are mutated for that individual's cancer, what's driving that patient's cancer. That, as a physician, gives me incredible opportunity, but as a scientist, it's also an incredible challenge. How are we going to manage all of this huge body of data that's available to us? How are we going to apply it therapeutically? How are we going to develop drugs that will both be effective and minimize toxicity? How will we be able to mobilize the body's immune system against the cancer, something that's been promised for a long time, but which is now finally coming close to fruition? So Komen can play a central role in this. First, simply by funding the people who will do the job. In this declining period of revenues for physician scientists, Komen is one of the great leaders on the planet in terms of providing support for cancer researchers who are interested in breast cancer. But we also supply organization through our Promise grants, focusing on specific areas that are cutting edge and important. We're able to help direct the field in the directions that we think will lead us quickly to a cure. And finally, just as Nancy made a promise and as all of you have made a promise, the Scientific Advisory Board has also made a promise. And that is to say, as opposed to the past, where we just sort of funded research because we thought the science was good, Komen has made the decision, the Komen Scientific Advisory Board has made the decision in recent years to say, we're only going to focus on those things that we think will be able to affect breast cancer mortality in a relatively short term, within a 10-year period. And that is a sea change for this organization. It means that everything that we do, every time we review the science that comes before us as a scientific advisory board, everything we do is directed towards a cure of the disease.
And what kind of opportunity do we have for that direct focus in our public health programming and through our community health efforts?
I think that's where the affiliate network is very strong, because we can we as a community, as an extended community, can clearly help the scientific community see where those needs are. And as each community is different, of course, there's overarching kinds of themes about where the need is the greatest. And Komen is in a very unique position to be able to focus those kinds of efforts. There's no other organization that I'm aware of that has what we have.
That's right.
The research portfolio is amazing and focused and led by some of the brightest minds in the world. Privileged to sitting next to one of them. And then there's the community out there that can raise the funds, raise the awareness, and identify where those needs are. And then we have the public policy arm as well, which is amazing to me that, again, our leadership was able to say that, yes, we can be soldiers out in the field and doing all of that, but with one stroke of a pen, we can facilitate a lot for a lot of people and fill huge needs and gaps.
That's right. Well, I think you've hit on the essence of Komen's mission in terms of the way that we're able to address it on so many different levels and through so many different avenues. And I'd like to add to our panelists today and have some additional guests come out so that we can talk with them about their perspective. The first person I'm going to ask to come out is Thomas Bruner, who is our Chief Executive Officer of the Oregon and South Washington affiliate. Thomas? Thank you for being here. The next person I'm going to ask to come out is Dr. Melissa Bondi. She's a Baylor College of Medicine McNair Scholar in breast cancer and an Associate Director for Prevention and Population Science at Dan L. Duncan Cancer Center at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. Hi, Melissa. And then finally, I'd like the Executive Director of the Orange County affiliate to join us, Lisa Wolter. Thomas, I'm going to start with you. And you're recently newer to Komen. Perhaps is this your first KLC?
Yes.
It is. Well, welcome.
And it's a hoot.
Yes.
Yeah.
You did what?
I wanted to come out here and dance with everybody.
Well, yeah.
Stuck back there.
We allow any kind of charisma, and George will tone you down if needed. But Thomas, you and I had a conversation. You know, interestingly, one of the reasons that a lot of these panelists were selected for the panel is because we've had conversations over the years and months about some of these topics that I thought were really important for us to talk about today. And Thomas specifically, within the role that he'd had in his affiliate, had come to me with some really interesting ideas about how he talks about research in his community. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I got to the affiliate, and our culture around research money it struck me as a little disconnected. And we talked about what we did and our grant making and our programming, and we talked about research as something you did. Although we had sent you lots of money over the years, so our money was your money.
Right.
And so we started to kind of shift that culture and think about the possibility of talking about Komen investment overall. So the first step was to try to figure out how much money had we given total in aggregate to Oregon Health and Science University, for example. So we got your data, we got our data, because we'd given some money also, and then we realized Community Health had given a couple of grants, so we got the data from Community Health, and we found out we'd given almost $3 million, and another $7 million was on its way. So we thought, $10 million? I don't know about New York City or Boston, but $10 million in aggregate giving in Oregon is a significant milestone. So once we realized that, we raised that up to the leadership of Oregon Health and Science University and said, we're excited and we want to meet with you about what we're going to do to acknowledge this milestone. So before we knew it, they had marketing people, they had communications people, their foundation staff, working with us on a personalized Komen donor recognition plan. And at the end of the day, we had the president of Oregon Health and Science University and Dr. Brian Drucker co-host a luncheon for 100 people up at the university. We invited our donors who'd given $1,000 or more, and we approached headquarters and said we assume they're donors in Oregon and Southwest Washington that have given to the national organization $1,000 or more, and we want to invite them also because we want those people to see us in action. So we had this amazing luncheon, did a press release, got picked up by the Oregonian and other media outlets. In October, they are going to name a room in the Women's Health Center for Komen for the Cure.
Wow.
And Sean's gonna love this, because I'm reading the affiliate weekly, and I see, who's here from Utah? Somebody's here from Utah. So I read that the Huntsman Cancer Center in Utah has named their lobby for Komen for $2 million of aggregate giving. And I think to myself, $2 million, get you a lobby in Utah. We want something bigger in Portland, Oregon. So we added naming opportunities to the conversation, and everything we brought to them, they were perfectly willing to consider, think about. We're going to take donors on tours of Komen-funded research labs at Oregon Health and Science University. And now, for donors who give us $2,500 or more in a year, we are doing a national research call update with guess who? As a part of the benefit.
With charisma, right.
Say what? No. You. It better be on your calendar still. So we're just integrating the whole research message in a new way. We're embracing it, we're owning it, we're taking credit for it, we're sharing it with you, and it's been an amazing experience for us.
Right. And Melissa or George, as sort of investigators at these universities, you can hear how important these partnerships are for us. What kinds of things could we be doing, or what's your perspective on how?
Well, I think more than ever right now, it's so important to have the affiliates and for other people to raise money, because research right now to get funding is getting more and more difficult. So we're relying on organizations like Komen. We're relying on donors and benefactors who can help facilitate our research to keep it going.
Right. And I think there's so many exciting things as well that we are doing, particularly within the focus areas that we've talked about. Let's talk a little bit about the environmental research. And I'll ask you, Melissa, because that's one of the things that we focused on with the Institute of Medicine over the last couple of years to do a breast cancer report on the environment. And then now we'll be funding research towards that, about $4 million or more in that area. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
I was really fortunate to be on the scientific advisory board when the group decided that it was important for us to try to understand what was going on with the environment and breast cancer risk factors and how that we look at this. So Komen really did this well and decided that we would take an evidence-based approach to try to understand what is really the risk factors and trying to look at things over the life course. So Komen commissioned the Institute of Medicine. They brought in all kinds of scientific advisors to the Institute who could really help understand and put together, as I said, an evidence-based approach to compile an amazing document. And we used that document to put together a request for applications to the scientific community. And I was really fortunate to chair the committee that reviewed these grants.
Yeah. Let's do a polling question on the environment and breast cancer. Can we put that one up, and can people see the slide? Okay, so the question is, when you hear environmental causes of breast cancer, what do you think that means? Environmental causes of breast cancers can include A, industrial contamination, pollution, B, anything that you eat or drink, C, medical treatments, D, shift work and being exposed to light at night, or E, all of the above.
Did we get the results?
I think that means you got it right.
Let's see.
E, all of the above. George, could you talk a little bit about sort of the science behind that and what we do know or what we don't know?
Sure. Well, to a scientist, environment probably means something different than it does to the average person. Scientists tend to separate out those things that occur as a result of our genes, those things in essence that are sort of hardwired into us versus everything else. And everything else is the environment to a scientist. Now, many of those things that we think of when scientists think of this aren't necessarily, for instance, air pollution. They tend to represent things like, how many kids have you had? How old were you when you started having kids? Did you breastfeed? Did you exercise when you were a teenager and in your early 20s? How long did you menstruate? Did you take oral contraceptives? Did you take estrogen and progesterone when you entered your menopause? And these things all tend to revolve around estrogen in some fashion. And what we've learned, if we've learned anything, is that anything that alters the estrogen balance in the body over a prolonged period of time is likely to have an effect in terms of one's ultimate likelihood of developing breast cancer. I don't know.
I think you said it perfectly. That's exactly right. We look at the environment, and I think it was 83% said all of the above. I think that's the correct answer, because we look at anything besides genes, we consider the environment.
I think one of the exciting things about Komen's portfolio in general is that we will do deep dives into some of these key areas like the environment, like prevention, metastatic disease. But then we also do fund important projects that are resources. So an example would be the Indiana University Tissue Bank. And George, I'd love to kind of hear you tell us a little bit about that. And then Lisa, I'd like you to tell us how your affiliate is going to be involved.
Sure. Well, so the Komen Tissue Bank at Indiana University is a unique international resource. It is the only tissue bank on the entire planet that is devoted specifically to collecting normal breast tissue. Now, it may be astonishing to you that we almost don't know what normal actually is. We know a lot about cancer, but we actually have spent very little time, very few resources, very little effort in terms of actually being able to look at normal breast ducts and see how they work. And obviously, if one wants to know how to fight cancer, how to understand cancer, one has to understand the normal tissue from which it comes. So the Komen Tissue Bank was put together at Indiana University with volunteer efforts, with a huge amount of volunteer effort associated with Komen, for the sole purpose of collecting large numbers of normal breast tissues from all types of women, young women, older women, women of different ethnicities, women of different genetic backgrounds, women with BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutations. And now this bank, which has several thousands of normal breast tissues that were collected from volunteers, is now available as a resource to researchers around the world. The Komen Tissue Bank, supported by you, sends tissues to England, to Australia, to all parts of the United States that's being used by some of the best breast cancer researchers on the planet to understand exactly what the normal breast is and what happens when you change from being normal to having a cancer.
Well, I have to start by giving a giant shout out to Chris Tanis, who is with our affiliate, and she's an advocate in science. She's just so deeply enmeshed in what will get us to the next level with research. And the tissue bank really grabbed her imagination and her attention, and she looked into it. And one of the things that she observed is that the majority, the vast majority of all the tissue that had been donated, the donors were Caucasian. So, what you might not know about Orange County is that we're a minority-majority county. We have the largest population of Vietnamese outside of Vietnam. We have a large population of Latinas. We have a large population of other Asian and Pacific Islanders. So we got together, we said, we have to get Indiana University Tissue Bank people to come to Orange County and do a collection because we can provide a value add. We can diversify the tissue and make it more robust, more appropriate, more inclusive of other populations. And because we know breast cancer affects women differently, having collection from other populations will mean they are included in that research, and that has worldwide implications. It has implications for every one of those communities who have often been left out of research. So we took that brilliant idea to them. They said yes, and in November 2nd, they'll be coming out and doing a tissue collection in Orange County. So what that meant was we needed to recruit a medical partner. So one of our healthcare systems is now partnering with us on this very, robust, important research. We are maximizing all of our inroads, all of our relationships in the Asian Pacific Islander community, in the Latina community. We're talking about research, the importance of them being included, that this is something unique and important to their population. And it has come back with, there's a little trepidation about, a biopsy punch. There's a little question about research and use of the tissue. And then there's this building of trust. They know us as an affiliate, they know Komen as a reputation, and this is a building process. And the one other great thing that's happened is we announced at our grants breakfast in December that we would be doing this, and got off the stage from that. The table from the Allergan Foundation kind of attacked me and said, we want to be a part of this. We want to fund all of the work that it will take locally for you to do this build up for the tissue bank collection and any expenses that you have for doing the collection. And sure enough, they, about a week later, turned around a $50,000 donation to support specifically our work on that. It's great.
It's amazing. It's great. You talked a little bit about the Advocates in Science and Chris Tanis's role. I wonder, Sandy, if you might tell us a little bit about that program and some of the things that you're doing.
The Advocates in Science are a group of Komen volunteers or associated with Komen in some way who have an interest in science but who are not scientists themselves. Many of the participants are breast cancer survivors, so they have a personal interest. Many of them just want to or feel very strongly that the science should be pushed forward. Advocates in Science, you're all certainly more than welcome to look into the program and perhaps participate. There is some definite and appropriate training that goes into place so that you represent Komen in the community well. There is an Advocates in Science steering committee, and we work with the Komen headquarter staff in order to try and make what we do very meaningful. The steering committee is the organization that matches the peer reviewers on the research grants, and that experience for our Advocates in Science has been extraordinary. The scientists not only embrace those members on those review committees, but really listen to what they have to say. And sometimes the advocates are a little bit timid in expressing themselves, most of the time not. And they usually have something very important to say. But I have to share with you, or I've already shared with you, I think from my perspective, the most important thing is that the scientists believe that what the advocates have to say is important and listen. And thank you, George and Melissa, for the experiences that I've had with you in that realm. Very, very supportive. And we're just going to continue to grow and continue to have input into as many areas in the scientific community as we can. Our biggest sort of effort or focus is to connect the research community to our affiliate community. We believe that your funders, and Tom, I think you're a perfect example of this, we believe that your funders want to speak to the Georges and Melissas of the world, that they want to know where those dollars are going and what they're doing and try to understand the impact that they're making. So if we can do that, if we can match scientists to communities, and then the researchers need advocates on their grants. In many mechanisms are required to have an advocate there, so we do that matching as well. I just think we all win. We're just all winners there. The more that people know about the great work that we're doing, the more great work we can do. This is a personal opinion, but I've been with Komen a long, long time. I know it's shocking to say that, but a long, long time. And part of the reason that I'm so invested in Komen is because the model that they have. That 25% of what is raised locally goes to research. I support that. I also support completely the 75% that stay in the community, because we need to help the women who are dealing with the disease in the families and all of those kinds of things that you mentioned before. And the other thing is that we don't try to go in and do something better than someone else, but rather we make those in the community better at what they do. But we are woefully bad at telling the world that what we do. I'm so pleased to hear that you've sort of taken what we do and made people aware of it, because they're not. They just are not. And it's sad. I mean, almost daily on a one-to-one basis, I talk to someone about Komen and tell them, and they don't know. They know about Komen. They know that we do good work, but they're really not aware of our footprint in each of their communities. So I so applaud what you're doing, and I hope the rest of our communities can do the same with the help of advocates in science.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about our community health programming, and then also particularly the fact that with the Affordable Care Act, that we can expect there will be changes to services. And George, could you tell us a little bit, sort of an overview of what that might look like for the breast cancer landscape?
Sure. Well, a huge amount of Komen's mission over the years, of course, has been improving access for women to screening mammography and other diagnostic techniques. A huge amount of local resources has gone to that. A huge amount of our central efforts from a scientific standpoint has looked at that. But the world is changing. The Affordable Care Act, among other things, is going to provide significant resources for underserved women to undergo screening and to be able to have mammograms as part of their standard health care. This is a good thing. It's certainly something we've worked for many years, and it's certainly something we support. It doesn't mean, however, that access issues have gone away. It doesn't mean that there still aren't local problems. We have spent so much in terms of community resources. You have spent so much time and effort in terms of trying to focus on issues of access that I think we're now at a point that we can be rethinking what we do. In particular, because you have all had local successes, we need to figure out what are those successes. We need to bring them together. We need to be able to apply them at a national level. In the era of the Affordable Care Act, with new and different challenges that face us, we need to figure out what are the lessons of success that you have gotten together, and how can we apply them across the entire country. And I believe firmly that many women with breast cancer die because the biology of their cancer is bad and we don't yet understand it. But I believe even more that way too many women die because they don't have access to things that we know are life-saving. And being able to take the lessons we've learned to apply that at a national level, I think will only make our job easier and better.
Melissa, would you like to add anything in terms of the disparities of breast cancer?
Well, I think that Sandy addressed some of those issues, as well as Lisa, about how we need to include in our research, and many of us are trying to understand more about different factors, whether they're among people of different minorities as well as underserved populations. The access to health care is important, but trying to understand, are risk factors different? And how do we include people of different, and just like Lisa mentioned, that in their community they saw that the Indiana Tissue Bank was mostly Caucasian, and what they're doing now to try to bring in other individuals into that tissue bank. For our research, we really need to understand what might affect everybody, not just Caucasian women, and much of the research over the years has included mostly Caucasian women. And so for much of our research, we want to look beyond the United States. We want to look at other global populations so that we can compare the results of some studies in African Americans to whether there's differences in Africa. So that Komen has been funding different types of research that goes beyond the boundaries of the United States. And I think that's important because not everything is the same here as it is in other countries, and we can learn from each other. And I think that the role of health disparities and health inequities is really important for us, and Komen has taken a major effort in that area of research. And tomorrow at one of the breakout sessions, there'll be a whole session on health disparities, and I welcome everybody to go to that session, and I think it will be important for you to attend that. So it's something that Komen has been recognizing for many years, and the whole global aspect of Komen is in the forefront, and that's a significant importance for this organization.
Chandani, can I weigh back
Yes.
in on the Affordable Care Act? Okay. So I think that the Affordable Care Act and the opportunity that it provides is one of the things that we have to be working on. It's mission specific from an affiliate standpoint around access to care. Think of our mission statement, access to care. This is one opportunity. It's a great opportunity. It's an opportunity that is complex. So it's the feds, and then it's the state, and then it might be a region and a county, and you have to know how it's going to apply to your area. California has right now a bunch of grants that we can't apply for because we can't take government money, but other people are, and they're going to have educators and enrollers to talk to people about, are you eligible? And if you're eligible, how much subsidy would there be? And then can you afford that subsidy is a whole nother question. So it's a natural for us to want to bring along the educators and the enrollers who are specifically going to talk about California's insurance exchange, health insurance exchange, and reach the women that we're already talking to about their breast health. If we can get a couple of those women enrolled and insured, they may be able to then go on and utilize the breast health options that are within that. Of course, we all know we have to also motivate them to do that, because even when we have health insurance, we don't all do that. So it's this wonderful opportunity. It means learning a whole new thing. It means partnering with other people who are going to be those enrollers. I think it's been really important for us to be at the table with the folks who really are going to get that government money to implement. It's important for us to be at the table to bring them along on our outreach. When Ambrosia goes and does mammography in the meat department of a grocery store that serves Latinas, we want to try and enroll some of those women. But I think there's another piece to this, and that is not everybody's going to be eligible. A lot of people won't be able to afford it, even if they are eligible for some level of subsidy. So there's still going to be a huge number of women uninsured, and we're going to need to be loud and proud about supporting breast health for the undocumented, the low income that choose to pay their rent instead of buy the health insurance through the state exchange, or for those of you in states that your state has opted out of doing an exchange, it's mandated that your folks be eligible for the federally set up exchange. So, wow, it's this whole new world. It's a whole bunch of stuff to get involved with. It's important to the women we serve, and there will still be a huge amount of people that we need to be looking to take care of. So it's all part of strategic planning, I think. It's part of being part of that healthcare community, and I would urge every affiliate to think about how you put that into your future over the next 3 to 5 years.
Lisa's point is 100% right on. And part of what we wrestled with, we should do it, we ought to do it, but it's as you said, it's a very big, complex, bureaucratic system. So it was hard for us to try to figure out how do we get our hands around this. So a couple of things that we're doing on a very practical level are training all of our grantees on how to enroll and how to work with other enrollers. And we're actually inserting some language in contracts that oblige them to do that, so that we're making sure that they actually do that. And then we're not stopping with our grantees, we're educating our own staff and volunteers so that we're able to speak intelligently also about enrollment and the importance of it. So those are a couple of practical things that might be helpful to some of you in some places.
But John Denis, that speaks to the strength of Komen. When we started, our focus was mammography because only 30% of women were getting mammograms. So there was a need and we addressed it. And the need is changing, the landscape is changing, and Komen has the ability and should take on those new challenges as they arrive. As one problem is almost solved, and there's other problems that present themselves. The affiliate network is so poised to make significant impact in these areas.
Right. And one of the questions, we're getting a lot of questions on the iPad, so that's great. One of the things that people are asking about consistently is, can you talk a little bit about the difference between overdiagnosis maybe of something like DCIS versus the term that people are hearing about downstaging the disease? And what does that mean? And can you tell us clinically, McGeorge?
Sure. Well, one thing that we know about every aspect of breast cancer, from diagnosis all the way to end of life, is that we routinely overtreat women and we treat the wrong women. How does this work in terms of mammography? Well, we know that, for instance, that many early breast cancers, in situ or non-invasive cancers, will never progress to being an invasive cancer. And this has been recognized for a long time. It's been commented on in the scientific literature for many years, and it's led to explosive arguments at scientific meetings and in public forums about who we should be doing mammograms in. Just as our therapy has changed, just as our therapy has become more individualized based upon the biology of the disease, we're now approaching a point where we're also going to be individualizing diagnosis as well. Ultimately, we will be able to identify women who are probably at very low risk for ever developing breast cancer during the course of their lives. And so resources will probably be better spent in terms of screening on other women. At the same time, we've already identified women, for instance, women who have BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutations, who are exceptionally high risk for developing breast cancer, and where in fact we need to do more intense screening, for instance, with breast MRIs. So what is changing? As in therapeutics, diagnostics is changing. And the one-size-fits-all that we've applied in the past probably won't be the model for the future. And that's, by the way, is going to have important mission elements for an organization like Komen, where we focused on making sure everyone had a mammogram in the past. In the future, what we'll need to focus on is that everyone has the right diagnostic technique approach to them, given to them as an individual. And this individualization is where we're going across the board in science and in breast cancer in particular.
Integral to Komen's mission as well is sort of what I had said earlier before, and you hear Nancy say it all the time, that where a woman lives shouldn't determine whether she lives. And an increasing part of our work has been in the global efforts that we've done. And those global efforts have been really aimed at downstaging the disease, perhaps really looking at the disease earlier and treating women earlier and screening. I'd love to call out one more panelist to join us today. And she will be able to talk with us about a particular initiative called Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon. So please welcome Dr. Joyan Olawole. She's the founding executive director of Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon at the George W. Bush Institute. And she's going to share with us a little bit about this partnership. Joyan, if you would, we would love for you just to tell us a little bit about the program and an overview.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit about Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon and the overview of the program?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be in your midst this morning. Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon is an innovative partnership that leverages investments in public and private sectors to fight breast and cervical cancers in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. And we do this by leveraging the platform that has been put in place by the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, knowing that women who are HIV positive are 4 to 5 times more prone to HPV infection and therefore to cervical cancer. So we want to be able to target this very vulnerable population of women. But we added on breast cancer to it because breast and cervical cancers are the 2 most common causes of cancer deaths in developing countries. You've heard some of the statistics earlier on today. And we're focusing right now in 2 countries in Africa, Zambia and Botswana. This partnership was born in September 2011, led by George W. Bush Institute, Susan G. Komen, UNAIDS, and PEPFAR. They formed the organizing partners, and they have been wonderful in leading us over the past 18 months or so to just take root in sub-Saharan Africa. We have 8 other private, corporate, as well as foundation partners who are committed to this cause.
Yeah. So I think a wonderful example of what public-private partnerships can look like, and then also how important collaboration is in cancer. And so I'd love to ask any of our panelists, where do you think we have some of the greatest opportunities for collaboration moving forward in any parts of our mission?
Well, we can speak from experience because when you look at the continuum of care for cancer control, you find out that there is no single organization or government that can fill all the gaps. Mm-hmm. So when you talk of primary prevention with awareness raising, you talk of basic screening and treatment, advanced diagnostics and treatment, including surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and palliative care, you need all the hands on board. And that's exactly how Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon is run. We're able to assign specific roles to our different members, and even the affiliates that are coming in and joining the 12, so that each person has an identified role, a commitment to that role, and of course, we monitor the role and the commitment. How are you fulfilling your commitment to this cause? So there is no government that can cover all of this. There are gaps, especially in developing countries. Mm-hmm. You've heard it already that, here you have mammograms. Most places we don't have. So we're having to train people to do clinical breast examination. And somebody needs to do the capacity building. Somebody needs to bring in the medication. Somebody needs to help with equipment, and so on and so forth. So all the hands just need to come together. And of course, the funding also to make things happen.
I think in our area we are shocked and appalled, as I'm sure we all are, around disparities in late-stage diagnoses and mortality in women of color in particular. So we've tried lots of different things over the years, some successful, some not successful, and so we're shifting our posture to be more of a convener around this issue in those communities, and going in and saying, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, and what will you do, and how can all of us collectively try to move this needle. And we don't go in with the answers, and we don't go in pretending like we're going to have the resources or anything close to the resources, because we don't. Right. It's a humble way to go into a community, but we found so far that people are really hungry for that kind of convening opportunity around this issue in communities of color. So that's one of the ways that we're going after it.
Just picking up on that, here in Orange County, we have partnered with the Los Angeles affiliate, which is directly adjacent, because there's a community on our border, you know, just like, who cares? It's on one side, it's on the other side, Long Beach, California. With, when we did our community needs assessment, we could clearly see that there was higher late-stage diagnosis for African American women in Long Beach. There was higher mortality from breast cancer. And so the two affiliates together reached out. And again, we were successful in receiving funding specifically from the Boeing Corporation for looking at this population and convening, as you said. I mean, we didn't come in and say, we have answers to this. We said, community, will you be part with us? And have convened an African American partnership, excuse me, and then continued forward with some additional funding from WellPoint, because they cared about that population, they cared about that disparity. So two affiliates working together, it's a funding opportunity, and then there's now been an infrastructure created with the African American community in that area that will carry on, and that is trusted. They trust Komen now. They trust we will be there. We will be part of, and they are part of, both ways.
Could I answer the question in a different way by saying I don't know, and I have another question, I guess? There is no lack of opportunity for collaboration and partnership in our neck of the woods, and I'm sure it's the same in everybody's neck of the woods. We have ideas, our staff have ideas, our board have ideas, other people have ideas that they approach us with. I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, I need to call the Oregon AIDS Foundation when I get home and talk to them about this project. What I want to do, though, is I don't want to just do more work. I don't want to just do more projects. I want to do it strategically in a way that's measurable and that moves the needle in terms of outcomes in Oregon and Southwest Washington. I am so proud that being part of Komen, I'm able to say 1974 or 1982, 74%, now it's 98%. Deaths have plummeted by 1/3. I mean, that is really powerful stuff. I can't say that in Oregon and Southwest Washington because, to be honest, I don't know for sure. And so I got to figure out, of all the opportunities and possibilities there are out there to do great things, which of them are the most strategic? How am I going to measure them? And how am I going to focus on those things so we move the needle and don't just stay really busy and do a lot of great stuff.
That's right. And that's, I think, really certainly what the future and opportunity is for us as an organization collectively. And, George, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the research portfolio and how we felt that way when we redesigned it 5 years ago.
Sure. Well, when we redesigned the research portfolio, as I mentioned earlier, the major change that we made was to say that we had to have impact. We define impact as a significant decrease in recurrence or death of breast cancer within a set time period. We look at every project that comes to us for research funding in that light. Is this going to save lives? Now, when I was hearing this conversation about collaboration, it struck me that the greatest untapped collaboration is not between Komen and others, but within Komen. That's right. And that is to say the collaboration between the scientists and the advocates, the collaboration between the advocates themselves. You all have learned all sorts of lessons that impact lives. Do you measure those to know what degree of impact you're having? Do you share that impact with others around the country? Because collectively, we can save an enormous number of lives, I'm sure, just with the lessons we've already learned, applying them throughout the organization. And I think if we do that, Komen will remain relevant forever. We will remain relevant because we are saving lives.
I just want to add to what George said, because I think what's so important is that in many of our large research projects, we have advocates that are involved. But at the same time, those of us who are working with Komen and the grantees that Komen funds would love to be out there with the affiliates and to be able to say what kinds of things that they're finding and help each other to communicate that information. And I think these partnerships are really important for us to be able to work together, and that's the real true partnership, is the scientists and the affiliate community, because in partnership you help bring the funding and we want to help with answers and to work together to communicate that information. And I think that that's really important for all of us.
And I think the lessons that we have learned in partnership with all these 12 members is something that we can share here to encourage you to actually partner. We've been able to fully engage in 2 countries within 18 months, and the third one is going to be launched 2 weeks from now. Right. So we're now counting about Zambia, Botswana, and Tanzania. In Zambia, for example, since we launched in December 2011, as of today, we've been able to screen over 41,000 women in that country. And according to the scientists and the statisticians who have worked out the calculation, that translates to 850 HIV-positive women's lives saved within 18 months. These were people who would not have hope. These are people who did not, for whatever how many years they've lived, have never had a pelvic examination. But just because of VIA, visual inspection with household vinegar, and treatment with cryotherapy, which is just freezing the cervical lesion with nitrous oxide, have been given new life. We went there last year under the leadership of President and Mrs. Bush and helped to refurbish a dilapidated clinic, and it was declared open for breast and cervical cancer screening. In the first 6 months, that rural clinic screened 1,500 women, which accounted for 10% of all the women who were screened in Zambia, a country of 13 million population. So this kind of partnership that helps people to identify a common vision, identify goals, and determine specific roles for individuals is really worth the investment. And we can say thank you to the American people because most of the partners are actually American. The dollars are being spent correctly. We are seeing the impact. 2 of the countries have already started vaccinating young girls against HPV. And that means we can prevent at least 70% of the cervical cancer lesions that would have occurred. In Zambia, we're already training nurses, midwives in clinical breast examination so that as the woman is screened for cervical cancer, she's also screened for breast cancer. And this is one of the steps we're taking to downstage the disease. So there's a lot more that's happening. We have some of the reports out there. You can pick them up. And you can also check our website, www.pinkandredribbon.org.
Thank you. Thank you. Just wondering if I could get a time check. We're at the end of our time, are we?
Can I tell one story?
Yeah. We'll tell one more story and then we'll wrap it up. Go right ahead.
Least you think that Zambia and global is never going to touch your affiliate. I can tell you the story that one day 2 doctors from the University of California, Irvine, young women, came in and said, tomorrow we're going to Zambia to the Red Ribbon, Pink Ribbon Clinic to teach clinical breast exam to the local group. Do you have anything you can send along? Our staff shot out in every corner of the affiliate. We came back, of course, with the clinical breast exam card. We came back with Ford Warrior scarves. We came back with our T-shirts from the race, and then anything we could think of. And they said, we'd like things to give away. I said, next time, tell us ahead of time. We'll do, whatever, a drive. We'll do something. So they took all of this stuff and went off, and a couple weeks later they called and said, we're back and we have photos, and I said, let's do a lunch and learn. I don't know if anyone in Orange County will be interested in Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon in Zambia, but the room was packed. They showed these wonderful slides, and here are all these pictures of the staff in Zambia wearing an Orange County Race for the Cure t-shirt. And Ford Warrior scarves. Do we have that photo to show? I think we have some pictures from that. And then after that, we talked to our local AIDS service organization and said, we should be doing, there it is, there, Orange County in Zambia. There, look at that. Ford Warrior scarves in Zambia. We talked to our local AIDS service organization and said, we'd like to do some work with your women's support group, and so now we're connected up with them, and we're also going to do a Red Ribbon, Pink Ribbon cycling event together, and it all ties together around the world.
It's wonderful.
We wish you the best.
Thank you. And at a higher level, we're also doing North-South exchange with the experts. Like some doctors from Zambia came to MD Anderson in Houston to see what the setup is like. How can we improve secondary prevention through a systemic approach, looking at what is available in the United States and how can we replicate that at the level of resources available in Zambia.
It's wonderful. Wonderful. Great. Well, we do have some time for me to answer some questions, and we have gotten so many questions. We could be here for the next week. Great questions. I'm going to ask this one that's kind of come up a couple of times from you all, and that's how can affiliates collaborate better together? And I'd love to hear from our affiliate representation in terms of some ideas that you might have.
So I have an idea. So I think about, is Nancy Lee in the room from Montana somewhere? So here we have Nancy Lee in Montana, one person, one staff person, affiliate in the state of Montana, and I'm sure lots of great volunteers. And it just kills me that she has to spend any of her time on Convio and Victory and no, I'm this is not an anti-Convio statement at all. I'm just.
You meant on data work.
That's what I meant. Yeah, on data stuff and PeopleSoft. That's what I mean. And when this smart, passionate, wonderful, articulate person, we need her out in Montana rallying the troops and raising money and developing partnerships and keeping us front and center and top of mind for everybody in Montana. So here we sit in Portland, Oregon. I don't know if there's something we could do for Montana. I don't know if we could handle her finances on her behalf. I don't know if we could take over some stuff for her. But I think those are opportunities that we should explore aggressively, and we should grab them and seize them and try to free each other up so that we can focus more on fundraising and mission and public relations.
It's amazing. And Dr. Sledge, we have one for you as well, which is how can we have better collaboration within the research community so that we're not funding redundant work?
Well, we already try to avoid funding redundant work through the way that we fund grants. We have a superb grant funding organization. What we do is we take our Komen Scholars. Komen Scholars are some of the great breast cancer researchers on the planet that Komen funds on a regular basis. We fund the person rather than the research in the Komen Scholars program. We take those Komen Scholars and they form the basis for all of our research funding efforts. They are the ones who sit on our research committees along with our breast cancer advocates to go through every single research project. We focus those research projects around areas so that we're able to get the best experts in the world in a room talking about a particular area. They in turn go through at every single step. What is, of the 40 research projects that this committee is looking at, what are maybe the 5 or 6 or 7 that we can fund? By the way, we'd love to fund more. We think we'd be able to cure this disease quicker if we funded more. But we take those experts, we avoid redundancy by having the experts look at what is the absolute best research that will have the greatest likelihood of impacting lives over the next few years.
Great, thanks. Now, another couple of questions that we're getting a few times over are particularly about triple-negative breast cancer. Wonder if any of you could speak to sort of that, Melissa or George, in terms of what we've done and where the research currently is.
I'm going to let George speak to that because I think in terms of the clinical practice, and there's been quite a bit of research that's been done in some of the PROMISE grants, and you might want to speak to a couple of those PROMISE grants that have had significant impact.
So triple-negative breast cancer means a cancer that is estrogen receptor negative, progesterone receptor negative, and HER2 negative. By the way, this is an awful way of describing this subset of breast cancer. It's like saying, I walk down the street and I see a red-haired woman and I say, she's not blonde, not brunette, and doesn't have a beard, okay? That's how we define triple-negative breast cancer, right? Makes no sense. But triple-negative breast cancer is one of the great remaining problems in breast cancer biology. We know that these cancers are pug-ugly cancers. They're rapidly growing, rapidly metastasizing. We can only treat them with chemotherapy today. And we know that this is the home, if you will, of a lot of the genetic forms, the inherited forms of breast cancer that can be so devastating to entire families. How are we going to approach that? Well, we approach that partly through our PROMISE grants. We've had very specific grants that have focused on aspects of triple-negative breast cancer. For instance, we had a PROMISE grant devoted to inflammatory breast cancer, a very common way in which triple-negative breast cancers will present. We have PROMISE grants that are focused on breast cancer genomics. We now, as I mentioned earlier, have unparalleled ability to look at every single mutation in the cancer. So we're focusing efforts in terms of being able to understand the biology of triple-negative breast cancer, looking through that lens of genomics. What mutations drive triple-negative breast cancer? How can we interfere with the processes that drive the triple-negative breast cancer? How can we apply that to the clinic? This is going to be a continuing effort for years to come for this organization. I think this is one of the great tough problems that us scientists have to face, but it's one that I know that we're going to be able to face going forward. We're also, because this has been a disease that has been focused around chemotherapy from a treatment standpoint for so long, we're also increasingly interested in non-chemotherapeutic approaches to this disease. Can we, for women who have inherited predisposition for triple-negative breast cancer, can we intervene before that woman ever develops her cancer? Can we, for the women who have developed the disease, can we find new immune-based approaches that will mobilize the body's immune system against the cancer to fight the cancer? By the way, there's some very exciting clinical research going on in this area even as we speak. I'm confident that we're going to find new ways to tackle this disease going forward.
Could I just add something? I hear in the community very often that research is so slow, that it just seems there's like nothing's happening. I want to share with you that I'm so privileged to be able to work with researchers like Melissa and George. They are so passionate, so very passionate, and so very dedicated about making change in this world that I want you to know that the science is slow only because the disease is nasty. And not because the effort isn't there. The effort is Herculean. I expect them at meetings to open their shirts and it says Superman under there. I mean, they really are dedicated and are heroes, at least from my perspective. So I wanted to share that with you.
Lisa, you have a particular question directed here for you, and someone wanted to know, what did you find was the most effective way to outreach to minority communities for your tissue sampling project?
I think it's important to be a part of the community from a volunteer standpoint, from a staff standpoint. You need to be there. Komen needs to be present. You need to, it takes a long time. You need to build the trust by reaching into and with perhaps your grantee partners who reach a particular population, get to know that those leadership people respect what they are saying to you. Yes, we bring a particular expertise, but not an expertise that's going to speak to that community until we know what the community needs to and wants to hear. I think it's the most effective thing is, of course, when you're looking at populations that are speaking a different language, monolingual perhaps, or English as a second language, you need to have the capability within your staff or volunteer cadre to speak to that community, literally, very literally. You need to have people involved with your affiliate that identify in that community. And as I said, you have to keep being present. You can't just sort of throw some money at the community through a grantee and then say, okay, they'll know about Komen, they'll respond to Komen. I have to be there, our staff has to be there, our volunteers have to be there. And as a Caucasian woman, I need to evidence that I am in partnership with you, whatever community you are. So it's a long process. It's money may be involved as part of a project, but trust is more involved and building that within the community. Do you have other thoughts on that, Tom?
No, that was brilliantly stated.
No,
it's fantastic.
Yes, one principle that we have learned, which can also be applied in the United States, is don't go into a community with the principle we are coming to tell you what to do.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's right.
You've got to listen to the people. And you've got to go with a flexible mind that what you've applied in one community may not necessarily work for the other. But you work together with them to find what is best, and you work with them to get it done.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank our panelists today. Thank you so much for being here. You've been fantastic.